There is a theory going on among Bible scholars in Israel and also outside of Israel, also Christian Bible scholars, that the Bible is not describing the whole story. Okay, and this is like, I would say, Bible 2.0. This is for people who are advanced and people who are really interested.
Oh, you're speaking to that audience.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to share some interesting thoughts about what's going on.
We're seeing these, and then we see the sandals of Tutankhamun, which we showed before, and even in their hieroglyphics of his foot on top of his conquered people. So who borrowed from whom? I mean, did the Israelites borrow this idea from the Egyptians, the other way around, or how did this happen?
Well, I remember being a student in high school and being aggravated that my teacher is saying that the Bible was invented and it was actually from Assyrian and Babylonian mythologies. So I remember that kind of brought me into a period where I was very zealous for the Bible, and in my mind, the Bible was given to us from God in Mount Sinai, and there's no foreign intervention. This is purely what God gave us, period. But I have to say today that I'm so confident in my belief in God and the divinity of the Bible that suddenly I'm starting to open up and listen to what's being said about the history of the Israelites, where they were, what they did, how they spoke, and suddenly I see that foreign influence doesn't take away from the divinity of the Bible. It actually verifies the biblical story. And when Adam Zertal is saying that the reason why the Israelites are building these footprint structures, and that this probably is from Egyptian thinking and culture, for me, that is not taking away from the historicity of the Bible, it's actually proving it. Because the Israelites were in Egypt for centuries. Right.
So in order for them to exist, they borrowed Egyptian
They were
ideas.
Part of Egyptian society. They spoke Egyptian. When you meet a person in the street with the name of Boris, you immediately know that he is probably from Russia, or his parents are from Russia. Well, guess what? Aaron, Moses, Miriam, Tzipporah, Phineas, these are all Egyptian names. Okay, that shouldn't surprise us because, again, the Israelites lived in Egypt. When you meet a Jew today in the United States, his name is probably going to be Henry or Robert, okay? But that's because he's living in America, in a place where people speak English, and these are the names, the common names. I'll give you another example. When we read the stories on Moses and how God says to Moses, just know that I will make the heart of Pharaoh
harden his heart. Yeah.
Okay. Now the word in Hebrew is kaved, ani achbid et libo, which means I will make his heart heavy. Okay. Now why am I putting this on the table? Because when we look at Egyptian theology, we see that when Pharaoh dies, when he passes away and he goes to the next world, there's a whole ceremony going on. The gods are putting the heart of Pharaoh on a scale, and on the other side of the scale is a feather. If the heart of Pharaoh is light, then he moves on to heaven. But if his heart is heavy, then he's not going next, he's going to hell. Okay? So what we have here is a clear quotation from the Egyptian theology. What is God saying? God is saying, I'm going to make Pharaoh's heart heavy, which means I'm going to send him to hell. Okay? Now, again, this shouldn't surprise us because the Bible was written at the time that it happened. So the Israelites know exactly what it means, but also the Egyptians. that are hearing this and listening to this, because Moses is in Egypt at the time that this is happening, and it's telling to everyone, Pharaoh is going to say no, because God is going to make his heart heavy. You understand? So this is another sign of Egyptian language, Egyptian culture, Egyptian religion that verifies that the Bible was written indeed at the time that it's describing.
Interesting. You know, in the New Testament, we have the epistles of Paul, where he is going to these Greek places, and he says basically to the Greeks, I am Greek, to these people, I'm this people. So he's trying to fit in to help them understand God from his perspective and speak their language, so to speak. And so it sounds like this is the same thing.
Exactly.
God is trying to say, hey, look, if you've been in the Egyptian culture for so long, I'm going to give you an Egyptian idea that you can grasp, because that's what you've grown up with. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But I actually have a surprise for you and our audience. There is a theory going on among Bible scholars in Israel and also outside of Israel, also Christian Bible scholars, that the Bible is not describing the whole story. Okay, and this is like, I would say, Bible 2.0. This is for people who are advanced and people who are really interested.
Oh, you're speaking to that audience.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to share some interesting thoughts about what's going on. I think the first question we need to ask is the Bible a history book? Now, our gut reaction is to say yes, because we have so many people denying the historicity of the Bible. And it's true that the Bible is describing real historical events. But the question is the Bible a history book? And my answer is, it's not. The Bible is a book of faith. It's a book of morality, of providence, of prophecy, of miracles. The Bible is describing historical events that prove that serve the narratives of the Bible, which I just mentioned. I'll give you an example. The King Josiah, for example, dies fighting Pharaoh Necho, who invades the land of Israel. What the Bible is describing is just the death of Josiah by Pharaoh, but that's it. Why is Pharaoh going into the land of Israel? Where is he going to? What was his purpose in invading Canaan? We don't know that from the Bible. But when we read external sources, we see that there was a world war going on in the Middle East. Pharaoh was going to the aid of Assyria against the rise of Babylon. So he was actually going through Canaan to fight against the Babylonians. And Josiah, in that context, is trying to align with Assyria or trying to defend Canaan from Pharaoh's invasion. But the Bible is not saying anything about that, because that's not important. What's important is Josiah's death. You understand? So if the Bible was a book of history, it would have to say everything about the context. Why is Pharaoh coming in? What's going on? What's his purpose? The Bible is not saying that. And so when we look at the stories of Genesis and the Exodus, we see something that historically is unbearable. The story in Genesis finishes with the death of Joshua and the Israelites multiplying. And then the next thing we see 400 years later is the story of Moses and the Exodus. So we have 400 years with no historical description, no historical account of what's going on with the Israelites, what's going on with the Egyptians, what's going on with Canaan. We have no idea. And the reason for that is because, again, the Bible is not a history book. The aim of the Bible is to get as fast as possible to the story of the Exodus and the miracles, because that's the important thing. That's the main stage. That's, they're going to Sinai, they're going to Canaan. That's the main story. So the question remains, what happens in these 400 years?
Good question.
And the good thing is that the Bible gives us a lot of riddles, but it also gives us information. And, I'm sure all our readers, or all our audience read through the Bible and they read the Book of Chronicles. But when you read the Book of Chronicles as a Bible scholar and someone who lives in Israel, you get some new information that you've never noticed. When we open the Book of Chronicles 1 Chronicles chapter 7, we see that there is a lineage of the tribe of Ephraim. Now, who is Ephraim? Ephraim is the son of Joseph. And apparently, Ephraim was born and raised in Egypt, continued living in Egypt. His descendants also lived in Egypt. But when you read Chronicles chapter 7, you see a totally different story. Suddenly, the lineage of Ephraim stops and we hear a story. And the story is that the children of Ephraim are being killed by the people from the city of Gat, which is in Canaan. It's not in Egypt.
Oh.
They're coming to seize their flocks, and the people of Gat kill them. And Ephraim, their father, mourns, and then he brings more children to the world. And one of those children is a daughter by the name of She'erah. And She'erah builds towns and cities in Canaan that we can identify today. So again, the book of Genesis doesn't say anything about this. The book of Exodus doesn't mention this. But we have clear verses in Chronicles that are telling us the following. Descendants of Ephraim are living in Canaan while the majority of the Israelites are in Egypt. And they're building towns and they're tending to their flocks in Canaan. And this is happening in the area of their tribal land that we know about later on in the book of Joshua. So this is news. What's going on here? We have Israelite tribes in Canaan.
Right, because we assume that all of Israel was trapped in Egypt.
Exactly. And now let me give you another interesting story. We go to the lineage of Manasseh. Okay, Manasseh again is the son of Joseph, the brother of Ephraim, someone who was born and raised in Egypt. His descendants were also supposedly have to be in Egypt, but suddenly we read the lineage of Manasseh, and we see that the son of Manasseh, Machir, is the father of Gilead. Now, for us, father of Gilead means that he had a son called Gilead, which is true. But the Bible scholars and the Bible sages interpret the father of Gilead as the person who established the towns and villages of the region of Gilead.
Like a founding father.
Exactly.
Okay, yep.
So again, this is surprising. We have another verse that says that there's a possible Israelite colony on the eastern side of the Jordan River in the area of the Gilead Mountains and the Golan Heights. And so why is this interesting? It's interesting because when we read the book of Exodus, when we read the book of Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, we have a couple of question marks that arise. I'll give you an example. The Israelites are advancing to Canaan. And suddenly we have some tribes that are seeing that the areas on the eastern side are very nice and very good for cattle and for livestock. And they don't want to go into Canaan. They want to stay on the eastern side. So which tribes asked Moses not to go into Canaan and stay outside in Jordan? So everybody says, oh, well, it's Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. But when you look at the Bible and you read it, you see that the tribes that asked Moses to stay behind are just Reuben and Gad. And Moses is angry at Reuben and Gad for not wanting to come into Canaan. And Reuben and Gad say to Moses, we will go first into Canaan, battle, and make sure the land is conquered, and only after it's conquered, we'll go back to our tribal land on the east. And then Moses is content, and he gives Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh their lands on the eastern side of the Jordan River. But the half-tribe of Manasseh never asked to stay behind. So, now we connect the dots. Moses acknowledged the tribe of Manasseh as already living there. Okay, the Book of Chronicles shows that the area of Manasseh, of Gilead and Golan Heights, was already inhabited by the Manassites. And so when he gives those lands on the eastern side, he has to refer to that area which already belongs to the tribe of Manasseh, even though the tribe of Manasseh never asked to be there. So this is definitely a way to solve that riddle, that question mark that comes up.
Wow, that's very interesting. So how do you make, okay, so we look at the Golan Heights today, very disputed area. How do you see politically today? Is there some kind of mirror with that sort of half-tribe of Manasseh being there, and now what's going on with that today? Is there some connection?
I think that the fact that God made us victorious in 1967 and in 1973, the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War, that we were able to liberate the Golan Heights, which were part of our biblical inheritance according to the Bible. These are the areas that belong to the tribe, the half-tribe of Manasseh. And suddenly we have them back. I think that that's a clear sign from God that this has to be part of modern Israel as well. And so, who knows what the future holds, but we have other areas in other countries as well that need to belong to the state of Israel, and who knows how that will go through. But I think that what's really interesting and intriguing in that theory that Israelite native tribes were living in Canaan while the majority of the Israelites are in Egypt, is that causes a huge problem. That problem is that when the Israelites are going through the miracles in Egypt, they're going through the parting of the Red Sea, but most importantly, they go through Sinai. They receive the name of the Lord, YHWH, because the Lord says to Moses, I appeared to the forefathers as El Shaddai. I did not appear to them as the Lord, YHWH. It means that this name started out in Sinai. That's where it came from. And so all of these events, the receiving of the Torah, the commandments, all of this is happening to a certain portion of the Israelite nation, while their brethrens are not part of it. By the way, in Mount Sinai, God says to the Israelites, I'm appearing to you, but also to those that are not here. Okay? Who are those that are not here? It could be the future generations, but it could also be Ephraim and Manasseh that are not part of this whole event that's going on. And so, we have a difference here. We have a part of the Israelite nation that is still believing in the pre-Sinaitic theology, which is monotheism, the monotheism of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's circumcision. It's the not eating the tendon, because with Jacob fighting the angel, they revere the patriarchal sites of Bethel, Shiloh, Shechem. They marry the brother with the wife of the late deceased brother. These are all commandments that are kept in the pre-Sinaitic patriarchal Israelite religion. Suddenly we have Israelites coming out of Egypt with a new, or an addition theological worldview and theology that needs to be adopted by the native Israelite tribes in the land of Israel. So again, when we see when we look at the Bible, we see that there are three covenants that are occurring in this story.
Hold it right there. Let's talk about that next week.
Okay.
There's a whole story opening up here.
Right.
My mind is blown by this. Makes all kinds of sense on all kinds of levels. So let's talk about that next week. So Aaron, thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming back next week. And you come back next week too, okay? We're going to talk about the three covenants, all about this story. There's a lot more to tell. So show up next week. Until then, Shavua Tov, and have a good week.
Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon, and I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.